Born in Blood by COVID Candy. Chapter 261 Monolith Lion. Everyone watching instinctively shuddered. Rank 5. That magnificent, colossal statue was a rank 5 spirit beast. To think everyone dismissed it as a normal statue. It wasn't painted. It was preserved. They watched, eyes widened, as the humongous lion's metallic surface slowly started to transform from where the blood touched it. Tufts of yellow fur sprung from where the metal once was. Like a ripple, it continuously changed the rest of the body. The vicious, outstretched claws of the lion gained subtle but growing movement. At the same time, the lion's menacing stone eyes gained a white sclera and a crimson, circular pupil. A low, guttural growl shook the air. An earth-shaking rumble violently rocked the entire island as it slowly came to life. At that point, the onlookers weren't comfortable watching. Those massive claws were still in the air. If it came down, there was no doubt that the entire island would break apart. They instantly jumped off the island and swam to the depths of the ocean. Only elders and a few shadows remained behind. Including Liam, obviously. Strangely, Unforgiven Shadow didn't attack Wild Fong or the awakening beast. After killing the lower-ranked beasts, only the monolith lion remained. But for some reason, Yusin was simply allowing it to transform without any interruption. And the claws were slowly plunging towards the earth. Whoosh! Boom! As the two paws struck the earth, a wave of destruction spread throughout the island. That was quickly followed by a shockwave. An area of 150 kilometers was instantly turned to rubble. As though nothing had lived there before. Towering plumes of dust and smoke rose into the air. Thankfully, those around the edges of the island had made preparations. Elder Arisa appeared beside Liam's group and formed an earthly dome to protect them. As the smoke cleared, the monolith lion came into view. Even now, its size was unbelievable. With its bright brown fur, vicious claws, lengthy tail, crimson eyes, bared fangs and savage muzzle, its appearance certainly matched its mighty strength. However, it didn't roar. The reason was simple. Wild Fong didn't want to kill his own disciples and elders. Wild Fong had a toothy smirk on his slightly pale, sweaty face. In reality, the rank 5 beast was in the upper tier. It was the very symbol of Wild Fong's greatest hunt. It took him years to make the preparations for hunting such a majestic creature. And now, it was his. Controlling it took considerable effort, but its power was a level above normal rank 5 beasts. What could a mere cloud do to such a mighty beast? Nothing. This rank 5 monolith lion wasn't like Wild Fong's other bestial companions. This beast could effectively express the entirety of his strength and cultivation prowess. Both Wild Fong and the monolith lion were of the earth element, as well. Unforgiven Shadow had to take this battle seriously. In fact, even the strongest rank 5 existence living within the mainlands would also have to take it seriously. Silver couldn't afford a half-hearted attempt at defense either. If he did, Wild Fong would undoubtedly win with a single attack. If one of them made a slight mistake, it'd be instant death. Now, half the island was covered by a deathly cloud, and the other half stood a 58-meter-tall beast. There was silence for a while as both forces remained still. Wild Fong didn't attack instantly. Neither did Unforgiven Shadow. Scared, Wild Fong taunted with a derisive scoff. There was no response. Instead, the cloud shrank rapidly, as though it was being vacuumed from the center. Fush! All of the smoke disappeared, and Yusin's figure slowly came into view again. The Chakudo blade that Yusin used was the so-called vacuum, and the cloud simply condensed, swirling around the blade like some sort of cotton candy. Then, there was quiet laughter. A strange, sinister, unnerving chuckle. It was Unforgiven Shadow. His faint laugh was dark and distorted, as if the mask had really turned him into some sort of demon. Everyone watching shuddered. As the inventor of the 10,000 shadows, Yusin had to practice day in and day out with the dark stars. Who knew what kind of effect that had on someone? Even if mental spheres grew stronger throughout the ranks, the dark star's corruption remained all the same. Wild Fang narrowed his eyes. Was he still not taking this seriously? Nevertheless, he didn't care anymore. The lion swiped the air once with its giant claw, summoning countless boulders that flew towards Unforgiven's shadow with unreal speed. Those boulders contained the strength of a rank 5 core. Ucladd let go of the Chikuto blade, which formed countless arcs of darkness on its own, and stretched his right hand forward. A darkness and shadow-made vortex spread from his palm and extended towards the trajectory of boulders, rotating in a circular motion. Shing! The boulders were diced into smaller pieces one by one. Right after, they crashed into the vortex. And were devoured instantly. There was no trace of them anymore. And the vortex only grew bigger. The result made Wild Fang sweat just a little more. What just happened? Wild Fang sent more and more attacks forward, each more destructive than the next. And the same thing happened each time. At the same time, Wild Fang realized that the vortex grew in size each time it absorbed an attack. Pounce him, Wild Fang commanded the monolith lion, desperate to get the battle over with. He didn't know what that spell or technique was, but he could guess. With its massive body, the monolith lion ran forward with speed that didn't really match its stature. With a loud bong, it left the ground and pounced at the floating human, its maws spreading wide to reveal the set of cruel teeth. Just then, the vortex unleashed all of its stored power inside the lion's throat. It rapidly expanded until bursting apart. Boom! At the same time, Ucladd swung his blade from top to bottom, the cloud turning into a thin line. Sheeing! And for a second, the world split in two. Chapter 262 Vortex. The vortex was the first to detonate, and it did so on the monolith lion's tongue. Contrary to expectation, it didn't kill the beast. Of course it didn't. A rank 5 upper-tier beast was not so easily killable. Instead, it was discombobulated and taken aback by the sudden strike, its tongue mangled and corroded instantly. A savage glimmer appeared in the lion's eyes. A reverberating growl grew in its throat, but Wild Fang stopped it before it turned into a roar. Despite his desire to win, he still had his elders and disciples in mind. Right after, the vertical slash, sharpened significantly by the condensed cloud, came. Within the seemingly spacious isolation barrier, the world appeared to split into two parallel sides, sliding apart from each other as though reality itself had been cut in half. The monolith lion's muzzle had taken the brunt of such a cruel swing, ripping through its sturdy snout and carving a gory path towards its face. The cloud-enhanced slash didn't manage to get past any more, though, and Unforgiven's shadow had to dodge the clamping jaw that threatened to clip him in half. At the same time, another 100 or so shadow blades emerged from the Unforgiven's two hands, spreading in a wild pattern that focused on different parts of the lion's body. The lion's tufts of lustrous yellow fur hardened into a solid brown, reducing the sharpness of the shadow blades into shallow nicks. They still had a corrosive effect, though, slowly but steadily wearing down the lion's defenses. At the same time, similar swarms of black blades shot towards Wild Fang, forcing him to defend. Even though the monolith lion's speed was fast, it wasn't as fast as a rank 5 human cultivator. The differences between their bodily sizes were just too much. The island rumbled violently. The very foundations of it were being split asunder. This was the power of rank 5 cultivators. They had made an entire landscape their battlefield. And there were just two of them. Who knew what kind of shenanigans they could pull off as a collective? Chunks from all over the island were being raised high into the air by the lion's command, then flung towards Ucladd's small figure one after the other. Ucladd was forced to retreat backwards, and the blade returned to his grasp. Only, if one took a deeper look at the weapon's surface, they would see nicks and subtle cracks. Barely visible, but alarming. Finally, the Unforgiven proved that he wasn't invincible. A mass of rock managed to hit him directly from the side, making him lose balance and grunt in pain. First strike goes to Wild Fang. After that, more and more attacks seemed to slip through Unforgiven Shadow's defenses, giving him little time to balance himself. One after the other, he had to dodge the lion's chomps, swipes, and constant barrage of boulders. He pulled backwards towards the further edges of the island, indirectly giving safety to those watching. Wild Fong was relieved as the battle raged on, a wide grin spreading across his lips. The cloud was officially gone. He could now push forward with his mighty beast and use all his spells full force, creating an all-out attack that determined which of them would live to. More than 12 vortexes appeared out of thin air, swirling in a wide circular motion as it absorbed the barrage of attacks, and growing bigger in the process. Wild Fong's eyes widened in shock. He'd never seen such a spell in his entire life. Something so well versed in both impregnable defense and devastating destruction. And so many of them, to boot. Each one of those vortexes were made out of a peculiar mix of darkness and shadows, creating its own suction force. It absorbed each earthly attack with little to no difficulty. Unforgiven Shadow was truly a prodigy. Ha 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 he ha. Yusin's face wasn't visible through the shadowy demon mask, but strange, stifled laughter exited through it. With more than a few hinges loose in his brain. Wild Fong growled, angry at himself. This was no time to admire his enemy. By now, most of his disciples had retreated to safety. They were beneath the nightly ocean, reluctantly sharing the same water as the acolytes, but there was a mutual treaty of peace between them for the time being. Their elders didn't attack either. Everything depended on the outcome of this battle. If the Unforgiven won, the entire Leash sect would undoubtedly be executed. If Wild Fong won, the temple would finally be eradicated. You're not the only one with tricks, fool. Wild Fong no longer held back. The monolith lion charged in, adorned with 2 bull-like horns protruding from its head, and leaped upwards to stop the black vortexes from growing any bigger. Simultaneously, Wild Fong stripped off his robe, revealing his chiseled body that was covered with strange tattoos that came from various beasts. A moment later, his body began to bulge with newfound muscles, doubling him in size and presumably strength. His red eyes seemed to gain a bestial quality, his hair turning wilder, and 4 lion-like fangs growing out of his mouth. However, Wild Fong suddenly felt drained of his strength. It felt as though he had picked up an extremely heavy object and was siphoned of all his stamina. Irk. Right after, unimaginable pain seared through him. In a hidden panic, Wild Fong inspected his body. There was a faint cut towards the bottom of his robe. A small, insignificant cut that he didn't pay any attention to. It was already healed, but the damage wasn't on the outside. Like a silent poison, the wound festered and rooted further into his nervous system, eventually activating. Wild Fong looked back towards Unforgiven Shadow with anger in his eyes. You scum! Wild Fong kicked the air. Bang! Together with his beast, he charged at the Unforgiven, madness in his eyes. This was it. 2 rank 5s charging just one. This would decide everything. The vortexes that had been silently growing abruptly chained together and converged in front of Yusin. Light bent around it, but strangely, it didn't have any gravitational pull. One after the other, their size and strength grew, then spread outwardly like a blanket to meet the monolith lion's charge. As it used its horns to attack the mass of blackness, the lion disappeared. Chapter 263 Gift. As soon as the blanket-like darkness met the lion's charge, there wasn't any dramatic shockwave or boom. Instead, the blanket just, anticlimactically devoured the beast. No one could tell what just happened. Nobody. Except Liam, who watched with wide-open eyes. That was basically a black hole. At least, it was a variation of it. Liam didn't think the world he lived in had studies regarding black holes. Most people had other things to worry about in their lives. Cultivation, survival, relationships, and more. Why would they look at the sky, which they had seen countless times already? Perhaps a few powerful cultivators had taken an interest in that. But what could they even search for? Granted, the possibilities capable with inscriptions and specialized forging gave way to incredible ways of research. But researchers were stingy, parsimonious people in this world. If there was a cultivator that found out the existence of a black hole, they certainly wouldn't mention it to anyone else. This meant that the unforgiven shadow managed to invent a spell similar to a black hole, without actually knowing what a black hole was. Genius, indeed. Meanwhile, Yusin's mask fell apart to reveal the maniacal smile on his pale, weakened and bloodied face. It seemed that using that specific spell took everything from him. And there was still Wild Fang to deal with. But the former was already weakened. The corrosive poison in his system had made his charge wobbly. Unforgiven Shadow evaded to the side and proceeded to stab his Chikuto blade into the man's neck, along with hundreds of different shadow blades assaulting him simultaneously. Amazingly, the blade cracked on impact, piercing barely an inch deep before it shattered into motes of glittering metal. There was a vicious but brief exchange of attacks as the two got physical. The rate at which those punches were exchanged were too fast for normal eyes to see. Yusin suffered powerful blows at his stomach and face, making him cough mouthfuls of blood. Wild Fang's body was riddled with cuts from the shadow swords. Instead of defending himself from them, he disregarded any defense and made it his life's goal to kill Unforgiven Shadow. The bestial look in his enraged eyes made the berserker hound pale in comparison. He was pissed. Battles were won with force. With might. With skill. This emo prick just poisoned him. However, as the battle continued, Wild Fang grew slower and slower. His eyes were bloodshot while his breathing was ragged and painful. Pieces of bone were jutting through his ripped skin. Unforgiven Shadow wasn't in the best condition either. His shadow demon mask had long been shattered, leaving his bruised face in full view. His right arm had been shattered into limp flesh, along with several of his ribs that weren't in their place. The killing blow arrived nonetheless. Yusin ducked under Wild Fang's swing, then tensed his hand and pierced the man's side. The shadow swords had focused on that spot specifically, softening enough for his hand to tear right through. Wild Fang flinched and roared weakly, throwing sluggish attacks that missed Yusin by several inches. In theory, exhaustion didn't apply to a rank 5 body. But what Wild Fang was going through was not exhaustion. It was enervation. All of his energy was being ripped apart from within him. And just like that, the rank 5 cultivator began making his humble descent towards the earth, his rage dying like the last embers of a dwindling fire. Before he fell, though, Yusin seized him by the head. Heaving a sigh, Yusin raised his head to the sky. He had done it. He was the victor. A single rank 5 battle took 2 hours to end. And what remained was pure desolation. Not a single plant lived towards the center of the island and what followed. Even a nuke was kinder to the environment than they were. Everyone watching was now at his mercy. There was a tense silence as he did nothing, letting his wounds heal as a shadowy substance reformed them. Slowly, Yusin turned towards those watching in the distance. The acolytes were suppressing their joy. The disciples were grieving for their deceased patriarch and their grim future. The leash elders looked ready to fight to the death, but they found themselves unable to move. Their shadows had them locked in place. Within the next instant, their shadows were forcing them to spread apart, and their bodies were slowly ripped in half like paper. A moment later, Yusin shifted his attention towards someone specific in the corner. Liam. Their gazes connected. Liam took a deep breath as he felt naked under the Unforgiven's piercing gaze. Why was he being singled out? There was shock in his widened eyes. But with it, respect and awe. He meant it too. What he saw was a display of power that made his ambition and excitement roar uncontrollably. What Yusin did next was unexpected. As though he were a ragdoll, Yusin hurled Wild Fang's body straight towards Liam. Liam activated cartilage brace and defensive skin as he leapt upwards and grabbed onto the dead man's wounded body before it fell to the floor. The surrounding acolytes looked at the scene with incredulous expressions. But Liam understood what this was. It was a gift. A rank 5 gift that came in the form of a corpse. Consume him and grow stronger, Yusin said. You and I will have a talk soon. With that, Yusin began to descend, and the temple elders shot towards his location. Those around him gave Liam strange looks. Consume? At the same time, Elder Jane gave Liam an envious glance, but said nothing, joining the rest. A rank 5 body was valuable. With unorthodox techniques in alchemy, forgery, and inscriptions, the elders could make powerful items with each organ in his body. And Ucladd had given that gift to Liam alone. Wise of him, Liam thought, storing the man's corpse in a ring. With this, Liam was indebted to Ucladd. If he didn't say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, it would just be disrespect and arrogance. But Liam didn't intend to do any of that. I wonder how long it would take for me to digest a rank 5 body. Liam smiled wickedly. Chapter 264 Blood. Liam stood exactly where he was as everyone around him began to migrate towards the center of the island. He couldn't help but constantly inspect his ring and look at Wild Fong's dead body. So much power. Dead. Stored in a ring. Reduced to food. How the mighty fall. Slowly, the isolation barrier unveiled itself from the top. The warm rays of dawn spread over the horizon and lit up the sky in a million shades of amber. Outside, everything was still the same. Nobody else witnessed the events of today due to the isolation barrier. Before the attack took place, a few members of the temple had blocked the entry ports to the island. Liam let the wind caress his face. Things were going to change after this victory. The temple had defeated a large-sized sect and claimed the entire island, including all the sectors on it. Their resources had surged above and beyond the norm. They could definitely make their way into the mainlands, Liam thought. Liam hoped they wouldn't. For one, he enjoyed peace. A steady rise in power was obviously what he preferred rather than a constant state of battle. Both were viable, since he'd gained strength either way, but still. Another was the fact that he had yet to use his rank 3 mental sphere to its fullest. The crueler inventions he could make, the improvements to spells, the spells themselves, the shifter, the black hole, the ravenous leash arts. But that wasn't the most important goal for the moment. Wild Fong's corpse was. He needed to devour and congest the rank 5 body. My blood is currently at the beginning of the rank 2 middle tier. And my body is edging towards the middle, too. Liam wasn't sure what would happen once his blood became rank 3 and beyond. At those realms, items and spells had specialties that made them stand out from the norm. So, what would his ichor, which was already pretty strong on its own, be able to do? Grinning broadly, Liam began to run towards the temple's underground chambers first. Thankfully, the battle between the two titanic powers didn't take place towards that area of the island. It was utterly empty. Everyone was looking towards the elders and the temple patriarch for what to do. But Liam already knew his goals. As he made his way towards his quarters, Liam's mind drifted to what Ucladd might want to talk about. Since he knew about his corpse-devouring abilities, and was kind enough to give him a rank 5 body, he probably knew a lot more than just that. Oh well. If he wanted me dead, I would have been already. Since he started with a gift, he's smart enough to know I won't truly work together with him otherwise. Liam arrived at his quarters and entered. First, he took out Wild Fong's body and laid it down. Rank 5 bodies didn't suffer decomposition. The same went for rank 5 spirit beasts. In fact, most of the wounds were slightly healed compared to before, but otherwise still prevalent. Liam practiced caution when dealing with the power of a rank 5 cultivator. As the bodily ranks went up, so did the life force contained in their blood, flesh and muscles. That was the same reason why Liam was nourished more when he ate cultivators with rank 4 bodies and rank 3 cores. And if he wasn't careful, well, he'd explode. I should probably begin with a finger or something. Liam took out a dusk blade and grabbed Wild Fong's index finger. Then, Liam raised his blade and swung as hard as he could. Shig. Liam furrowed his brows. The blade barely went in. It drew merely a drop of blood. Liam applied more force and used his blade like a saw. It took him a solid 2 hours to rip out the finger, and by the end of it, the edges of his blade were a little bit dull compared to before. That was fine, though. Liam wanted to make improvements to the weapon, anyway. Now. Liam thought, holding the finger. Do I go all out or bit by bit? Consuming the whole thing in one gulp wasn't really wise. He didn't know the exact measurement of power contained in the flesh of a rank 5, even in small amounts. Eventually, he fully transformed his teeth and began with a small, precise, slow bite. Crunch. Chomp. Crunch. Crunch. Damn it, it's so chewy, Liam cursed, his face twisting and turning as he viciously gnawed on the finger. Truthfully, the taste wasn't that bad. Liam was used to eating disgusting filth. But a rank 5 body was different due to how pure and dense it was, like a juicy beefsteak without seasoning. He made sure to break it apart thoroughly. If he didn't, it would take way longer for his stomach to melt it. Gulp. Finally, Liam swallowed. Liam didn't waste a second and began to cultivate the flesh, making sure to spread the nutrients evenly throughout his body. A few hours passed. Liam's skin had turned red all over, exuding hot mist. His ragged breathing had also turned warm and steamy. His muscles rapidly twitched and pulsed in random places. His veins seemed to expand as the blood running through them boiled. Liam didn't expect the effects of devouring just a finger to be this great. It was just a finger. Yet, amazingly, there was just as much nourishment that came with it. Liam's blood was progressing at an amazing rate, nearly 13% into the middle tier with just that amount he ate. And it was still rising in percentage. But being too fast was also a problem. What would happen if Liam eventually devoured the entire body? Is my blood really going to advance to rank 3? Liam thought as his body slowly calmed down. His skin had slowly reverted back to normal, and his body slowly stabilized. Liam stored Wildfang's corpse. There's no way I'm taking another bite until the life force dwindles down. This is clearly a long-term thing. In the meantime, I've been itching to invent something new for a while now. Brainstorming ideas wouldn't hurt. And the rank 5 battle had given Liam a morbid idea. Chapter 265 Cursed by All. Worms were peculiar creatures. On their own, they were nothing powerful. Even rank 3 worms were relatively easy to kill if one stayed out of range and took advantage of their frail bodies and lack of defenses. They had a bad reputation too, calling someone a worm meant they were insignificant and worthless. But if a worm made its way inside you? That was an entirely different story. Some parasitic worm species were so vicious, even their rank 2 versions could liquefy the insides of a rank 3 body in moments. During Wildfang and Unforgiven Shadow's fight, a light bulb flickered above Liam's head. Specifically, Wildfang started to grow tired. If a worm somehow managed to enter through someone's flesh in the middle of a battle, how would they deal with it? Well, the answer was simple. They wouldn't. Granted, if the worm hadn't burrowed deep enough, they could probably just dig their hand into the wound and yank it out. But any deeper? The only way they could think of taking it out was if they had some sort of specialized tool. Where would they even get that? In the middle of a battle, no less? What Liam had planned was a worm-shaped item that could dig as deep as possible and ravage the insides of its victim as much as it could. Making something like that was complicated, but not impossible. Plus, the experience from working with the abyssal needle steadied Liam's hand when working with smaller objects. Most worm species are either earth elementals or darkness elementals, which makes it easier for me too. All of those factors combined, Liam's next weapon was going to be a worm. It sounded a lot worse than it actually was, but it truly wasn't. Nevertheless, before Liam began making the blueprints for such a weapon, Elder Aki emerged from a puddle of shadows behind him. She hadn't worn her mask, and a few gruesome wounds on her small frame were still in the process of healing. She had a strange look on her pale face. Few people could act comfortable around a cannibal, after all. Master requires your presence, Elder Aki said. /////. It took 2 hours for Liam to arrive back towards the Ravenous Leash sect, where the temple had now settled. Elder Aki had already flown back to the temple before him. The aura density there rivaled even the academies, the source of which was coincidentally an aura well. Acolytes of the earth and water elements had managed to refurbish and fix up the craters in the desolate environment, including rebuilding the living quarters for each acolyte. Rivers were somewhat redirected and returned to normal. Waterfalls started to flow again. In time, the fauna and flora would flourish once again. Where the monolith lion statue once was, a massive black temple had taken its place. Covert and protective formations and inscriptions were already being built around its perimeters, enough to protect them from a foreign zenith probing. Meanwhile, Liam came face to face with two large, circular doors. The umbral shadows around the dark corridors swirled and moved in subtle but irregular ways. Whenever Liam moved forward, the shadows slightly flickered and shifted. As though beneath the blank sheet of darkness were a pair of eyes that tracked his every movement. I need to ask him how he does that. He's looking at me right now. Better not make it look like I'm nervous. Liam pushed the doors apart. There wasn't anything of note inside the hall. It was just a miniature isolation barrier that spread across 35 meters, filled with thick darkness. Grander than normal, but Liam's expectations were far higher. Towards the furthest wall, Ucladd was seated cross-legged, his eyes closed, his body cloaked in shadows. There were no traces of the wounds he had suffered. Slowly, his distant amber eyes opened and fixed at Liam. Liam met the man's sharp gaze and didn't flinch. There wasn't any mental energy pressed against his mind. He wasn't under any threat. But the atmosphere in the room was just unnerving overall. There was just silence for a few seconds. Liam didn't speak first because he didn't know what the man wanted. Ucladd just looked at him in silence. "Show me," Ucladd said blankly. Liam raised his brow. "Show you what?" Ucladd sighed, as though a little disappointed. "Your demon form." Silence. Liam had expected the Unforgiven to know about his other form, but the request was still strange. Inwardly, Liam let out a sigh. A moment later, chaos churned in his chest and transformed his figure. Pure white hair, 2 arms to 6, terrifying and beautiful. Ucladd expressed a bit of silent surprise. "How long can you hold it for?" he asked with a calm, toneless voice. "Give me details." 3 to 4 minutes at most, Liam responded, his voice demonic and guttural. "My physical strength triples, but the organ in my solar plexus depletes with chaos, the power source for my transformation." Liam gathered a bit of crackling chaos in his hand and threw it at the isolation barrier. Boom! The barrier trembled momentarily, and a shockwave ran out, but there wasn't a dent on its surface. There was silence after that. It looked like Ucladd was digesting everything. Liam reverted back to his human form and waited for a response. 3 seconds of silence passed. "The word for Ashura in ancient Alalian roughly translates to cursed by all," Ucladd said abruptly. An old myth stated that once every 500 years, a wretched soul would be marked with that title, doomed to suffer until their inevitable demise. Even those around the wretched soul will eventually die. Only a fool believes in a sourceless rumor. But here you are before me. Cursed by all. Liam said nothing, simply shrugging. "I don't care," Liam responded. Ucladd made a subtle smirk when he saw Liam's change in demeanor. "Good enough," he said, rising to his feet, his voice containing a bit of emotion. "You're no coward, at least." "Forget about that story." Ucladd pulled out a few scrolls from his shadow. "Give me that cloning spell and I'll give you something of similar worth. You'll need strength before we venture to the mainlands." Chapter 266 Inner World. "Why can't you exchange all your spells with me?" Liam asked, uncaring of how shameless he sounded. "I'm sure you have nothing to lose. It's not like there's anyone else with a darkness element besides us." Ucladd shook his head. "I wouldn't mind either. But most of my spells aren't made from darkness alone. They're made from my own kind of shadow, too." Liam didn't understand. "How?" he asked. Liam used that moment to learn more about how the higher ranks worked. He was looking for the right opportunity all along, and this was it. Unforgiven shadow sighed, giving Liam a scrutinizing look. He definitely knew that Liam was fleecing him for knowledge, but he didn't mind too much. Now that the two were cursed buddies, he didn't have the usual coldness on his face. "Because I've finally found my path," the Unforgiven answered. Before Liam could ask, Ucen continued. "Why do you think I've been in seclusion for so long?" Ucen asked rhetorically. "As you rise up the ranks, you're pretty much becoming a soul entity. You distance yourself from the world, and by extension, the opposition system. Your powers slowly shape around what you are, rather than what's already established for you. You break out of the mold. Think of it as building a road. You can choose the materials, direction, and size of it, but everything leads forward nonetheless. Paths are one of a kind. There's no script to follow beforehand. You figure out things as you go. As you add more and more pieces to your road, eventually, it'll lead somewhere. The sixth rank. Understand?" Unforgiven Shadow's explanation was worth more than any sort of wealth that Liam could imagine. It gave him insight as to why Wildfawn's bestial aura was so much more different compared to Unforgiven Shadow's precise darkness. They were merely on different paths. But with that explanation came more and more questions. What defines a path? How could the path grow? Can one change their path as they go forward? "Don't ask too much," Ucen cut in. "Why do you think the rank 6 cultivators in the world don't just pass everything they know to their heirs?" Liam obviously didn't answer. "Because every path is unique to the cultivator. If I tell you anything more than the bare minimum, it'll affect the path you take." Liam nodded firmly. One thing was for sure, Liam's path was going to be unique to him. He wouldn't have it any other way. "Now, the spells," said Ucen, a hint of annoyance creeping into his tone. Liam didn't have any issues with the deal, although a little disappointed to learn of Ucen's plan of venturing into the mainlands. He took out the shadow clone spell and handed them to the man, before receiving a scroll back. It looked a little worn down by time, but as long as the functionality remained the same, Liam didn't care. He unfurled it, his excited eyes scanning for a description or name. "Inner world." "Inner world spell? What does this do?" Liam asked. The description wasn't an Alalian or a Quarian. "Gives you your own personal domain." Liam's eyes widened. "The cloud?" Ucen shook his head, sighing again. "No, it turns your shadow into a different dimension that you can manipulate freely." Liam's eyes widened further. "It's basically a space ring you can physically enter through and bend reality in. As long as you know something deep enough, you can remake it inside the inner world, and it'll imitate the real thing." Liam's eyes widened some more. "It has its limitations," Ucen said. "You can't put other living things there." "Well, you can't, I can," Unforgiven Shadow thought, but actually said, "Anything you make also has to have the required materials. It's basically a perfect workshop. You still have to put in the work. It also uses massive amounts of aura. But as your mind advances, you'll be able to do what I did with the big dog." Liam blinked. "Big dog? Does he mean the lion?" Liam began to memorize it on the spot. Ucen had things to do, but he supposed he could spare a few more minutes with the inhuman child. In the meantime, he simply scanned the shadow clone spell. Soon enough, Liam learned the inner world spell, and it activated instantly. Suddenly, his shadow expanded and grew on its own. It stretched to an incredible amount, like a piece of gum being pulled from one end to the other. Then, it stretched back into its place. Liam dipped his foot inside the shadow. It went through. And it wasn't the sea of darkness. His inner world was like a vacuum within reality itself. The spell was basically like a capped bottle filled with water inside an ocean. In this case, the water is reality itself, and the bottle was his shadow. In short, it was a pocket dimension of sorts. Liam fully entered the inner world, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Everything was coated in a layer of darkness. There were no defining features at all in the space, like an eternal void with nothing inside. It was cold, too. Soundless, but strangely serene and comforting. It really is a vacuum. Liam looked up, where the faintest light shone through. His shadow was like a window to reality, where the room was just outside. However, Liam instinctively knew how much space there was in there, roughly 45 meters. Not the best, but then again, it wasn't as limited as a space ring. The floor he was standing on was invisible, just another part of the void. Liam's mind was connected with the entirety of that space. It was his personal domain, and he could do anything he wanted. A moment later, Liam began to float and fly. His mental waves sent out a ripple, and everything changed. Now, his inner world resembled the headmaster's office from the academy. A stark replica, with the same ornate furniture and paintings, but everything was made out of solid darkness. A chunk of his core aura was also consumed in the process. Liam smiled broadly. Chapter 267 Parasite Worm. Liam brushed his hand over the furnishings. They were solid, and had the exact same texture as wood. However, they weren't. If Liam wanted to make the actual paintings and wooden furniture, he'd have to throw wood inside the inner world. It was like his illusionistic abilities had found a way to manifest themselves into reality. Once the tables were made, Liam could freely move and manipulate them to other things, without spending more aura. A moment later, Liam gathered chaos in his hand, then hurled it towards the furthest invisible wall. Boom! The fabric of the void was momentarily blasted apart. Liam's mind and core were shaken too, but aura automatically left his abdomen to reform the space to its original state. If this meant what he thought it meant. Making weapons and spells had just become ridiculously easier. Liam's materials for making weapons, spells and general inscriptions were rudimentarily basic. For inscriptions, it was blood. Just blood. And Liam's blood was practically endless, unless he severely exsanguinated himself. The same thing went for Liam's forging. Spirit beasts were so easy to kill, it was just an annoying chore at this point. Liam exited his inner world with a broad smile on his face. He was satisfied with the outcome. But there was also something else. I also want to ask something else, Liam said as the meeting was nearing its end, leaving his inner world. Ucladd grumbled, his attention still fixed towards the shadow clone spell. It's nothing big, Liam reassured. I just want your help on something. Liam proceeded to tell Ucladd the details of his three-way body tempering method, which he proceeded to name the triumvirate body. It was fitting, combining three different amazing powers into one single entity. Along with that, Liam mentioned his desire to remake the ravenous leash arts as well as merging his blood and shadow together, forming a black hole. Obviously, Liam didn't outright say black hole. That wouldn't make sense. You're crazier than me, Ucladd said with a blank expression. But you've prepared. As long as you do the handiwork and make the technique yourself, me and the others will help. Liam hid a smile and thanked him. That made the possibility of the method way easier. Adding a pulling force to the vortex as possible, Ucladd took out another scroll from his shadow, which Liam now recognized as his inner world. You can study this. Liam raised a brow. Don't think I don't know about your little eye. I just don't care enough, Ucladd scoffed. It's the rank 4 version of the dark vortex. Liam didn't say anything and quietly accepted the scroll. From the shadowy writings on its metal surface, Liam could faintly make out some meanings. Ucladd must have made the technique when he was still a rank 4 magus, since it wasn't too advanced. Before the two parted ways, Liam couldn't help but ask a question. What do you plan on doing next? Ucladd remained silent for a few seconds. There was no need for him to answer to a mere mortal ranked cultivator. But he did anyway. I don't need to defeat the 7 clans. I just need to bring a few to my side. Just focus on getting stronger, the bounty won't get anywhere. A year, maybe 2, would do well for the temple. Liam nodded. In that time period, he should be able to devour Wildfang's body, too. Maybe even advance his blood to rank 3. With that, Liam was shooed away and searched for his new home. He didn't have to go for long, since his new temple-shaped home was very near to the Aura Well. And it was massive, too, enough to contain at least 4 rank 4 beasts side by side. Compared to the other Shadow's quarters, his was embarrassingly eye-catchy. The culprit, Jargon, was pretty adamant about directing the reconstruction of his liege's home. Inside, the shifter, Egg, was in the same inscribed cage Elder Jax had made for him. Along with that, there was a large stash of rank 4 corpses in preservation containers. Some were alive, held together by the ravenous leash chains. Another room contained elixirs and pills. Liam ignored the octopus' angry squeals, fed it, then entered the vast basement. The auric density here is really profound. With Wildfawn's body, I should get a boost in everything, not just my blood. A second later, Liam entered his inner world. Then, he took out Wildfawn and his dusk blade. Then, Shig. Liam cut off another finger. He supposed a single finger was still fine to consume. It was a fine line between exploding and progressing unnaturally fast. After 2 hours, Liam finished digesting the finger. His bodily temperature rose to an unnatural degree, and steam emanated from his body. But his blood purity had gone up roughly another 16%. A moment later, Liam started the parasite worm project. He had already found the perfect species to make it with, and the first stages of his forging had begun. Working inside the inner world was just perfect. Problems that arose when making items had just gotten so much easier. There was no longer any need to make so many preparations. All Liam had to do was throw the burrow worm, the spirit beast that he decided to work with, into the inner world. It simply consumed it, and Liam could manipulate its shape freely. It was like a surgeon using specialized technology to dissect and perform surgery on a person. Every little movement Liam made was just as precise. Also, blood was an acceptable resource to the inner world, meaning that Liam's spellmaking had also become easier. Like so, Liam spent the next few months in between several projects, but most of his focus was on making the parasite worm a reality. Meanwhile, there were bits and pieces of information that came to him via the temple's spies. The treasure hunt for Liam Royce's head had finally come to an end. There were just too many dead ends, and Alalians were pretty sure that the boy escaped Alali long ago. The ravenous leash sect had also barred outsiders from entering, which was strange. Like so, the months passed. Chapter 268 Black Hole. It took Liam 1.5 months to figure out the parasite worm. That was a major improvement. In actuality, it would have taken him more than 3. But the inner world was just amazing. It made things so much easier. There were many other functions that it had. The design of this morbid invention was unnerving. Its tip was sharp and pyramidal, like a thicker version of a needle. Liam didn't feel comfortable repeating the same design repeatedly. But for this invention, it seemed like he was forced to. The parasite worm needed quick entry, something that pierces flesh upon contact. The rest of the body, however, didn't share the same quality. It was soft and flexible, exactly like a worm's exterior. However, inside was where all the magic was. It consisted of a single contraption. Literally an imitation of a muscle. What did this muscle do? Contract. It contracted and relaxed in rapid succession, like a hand being stretched and yanked back repeatedly. Of course, this on its own wasn't anything special. At the parasite worm's tail was a small booster of sorts. It sped up the parasite's burrowing speed by releasing a condensed jet stream of gaseous darkness. It used the same science as a rocket did, which also meant that by the time the booster ran out, the parasite worm would puff out. But that was the good part. When the parasite neared its end, it would start melting inside the poor victim's body. It was a rank 3 item that contained Liam's new and improved blood. Even without inscriptions, the forged item on its own could inflict grievous wounds. But that was that. Liam stored the parasite worm and moved on. As soon as Liam finished that project, he started another. No seconds were to be wasted. In between whatever he did, Liam constantly updated his triumvirate body. Anytime a new idea came to him, he'd jot it down and add it to the foundations of the technique. He had begun, but it was still in its very, very early stages. Something like that wasn't made straight away. It was a gradual process. Like grains of sand that gathered into a pile then formed a hill. Nevertheless, Liam shifted his attention towards the black hole next. The dark vortex spell that Unforgiven Shadow had given to him proved extremely useful in helping him understand it. But the most important aspect wasn't there. The gravitational pull. Of course, it wasn't impossible for Liam to imitate. Probably. If Unforgiven Shadow couldn't do it, could he? Of course. Probably. Liam's knowledge of meanings and links had reached the level of a respected expert, but he was still held back by experience that came with age. Nevertheless, Liam continued to ram the problem from different angles until he eventually made a discovery. 4 months passed. Liam was now 18 years old. Liam still hadn't finished devouring Wildfang's corpse. He had finished 1 hand and 5 fingers, but that alone caused his blood to push past the middle tier of rank 2. His core and mental sphere were also noticeably expanding at a faster rate. Just a little. It would take at least a year or more to advance to a rank 3 core. Unfortunately, however, Liam still didn't get how to invent a black hole. He had no clue how to add a gravitational constant to his darkness and shadow. Liam initially used the analogy of a magnet to get the job done. A south pole and a north pole that created an electromagnetic field which gained an attractive force. But it couldn't be called a success. The resulting shadow definitely emitted a faint attractive force, but before it could properly be utilized, it simply switched off. Over time, the effects of his blood merging with his shadow had definitely gotten stronger, but nothing really held. Liam was getting frustrated. It was just too complicated. Obviously, Liam wasn't giving up, but he reckoned whether or not changing his priority was a good thing. The black hole was important for a lot of his plans. Mainly, the triumvirate body. But with the sluggish rate that he was going, Liam would need at least a year or more to figure out the issues with such a technique. But then, Liam turned to his chaos. Perhaps there was nothing more repulsive than his primordial essence. If a black hole had an opposite, then his chaos fit the bill. So, what did Liam do? He studied his chaos instead. To the ignorant, that sounded extremely dumb. Why study a polar opposite instead of studying the real thing? However, to understand the darkness, one must understand light. It was as simple as that. The two forces came from each other. Repulsion was a necessary force. Attraction was also a necessary force. Where they opposed each other, was where Liam studied. Countless tests took place. One boom after another. One migraine after another. One emptied core after another. And after another 2 months. Liam had achieved something. The result was a mix of his shadow and 3 states of darkness, along with an unhealthy dose of meanings added into it. In his inner world, which had reformed for the nth time due to the massive explosions done to it, Liam held his palm up. Darkness gathered in the form of a small sphere, barely the size of a clenched adult fist. Light bent around it, and seemingly reality itself did. A soft hissing noise surrounded it. Not as obnoxious as his chaos was, which was a good sign. Liam still didn't get his hopes up. Too many failures gave him a cynical outlook towards near successes. If he didn't see perfection at the last step, the beginnings didn't matter. A moment later, he willed out a precise measurement of blood from his free hand and poured it into the sphere. The circular sphere absorbed it. Slowly, it changed hue. From pure black, it gained a dark red shade. Liam gulped. Liam kept pouring more blood inside. Up until the sphere began to slightly brighten in color. Then, Liam stopped. The sphere wasn't broken. It continuously swirled and rotated indifferently. Was it a success? Could he finally move on from this stupid task? Time to find out. Chapter 269 Blood Shadow. Liam exited his inner world with the black hole in his hand. To be fair, he hadn't expected this whole thing to work so fast. He thought it might take at least another 3 to 4 months. Do I just absorb it and hope it changes my entire shadow? That sounds too dumb to work. Then again, most things that were common sense sounded dumb in actuality. Liam sighed. Then, he manipulated his shadow to coil up his leg, slither towards his chest, run across his palm, and envelop the black hole entirely. The black hole vacuumed in Liam's shadow and merged with it as it shot towards the ground on its own. Liam's eyes narrowed. There was silence for a while. Nothing happened. Liam cursed himself for letting months of hard work go to waste. But then, something happened. A small patch of Liam's shadow had taken on a red hue, swirling on the ground like oil and water. They were together, but they didn't mix. Liam was amazed. It worked? It actually worked? It worked. Liam really needed to act dumb sometimes. It definitely produced results. The black hole was actually a rank 1 spell. It had 0 destructive or defensive capabilities. However, it was just a foundation of sorts. Liam could definitely add more upon it. That said, he didn't actually know what the patch of bloody shadow could even do. Liam made it swirl and wrap around his hand. Nothing really happened. Besides his physical strength rising a bit higher than normal, there wasn't a major difference. Liam pursed his lips and furrowed his brows. Am I doing something wrong? Liam performed a few tests afterwards. There still wasn't anything of note. The bloody shadow worked the same as any other, but Liam instinctively knew there was something to it. After all, he had combined 2 very different properties. A shadow was mercurial and mendable in nature, and Liam's blood was a speciality of its own. Wait, maybe. A moment later, Liam took out the core of a rank 3 black panther and crushed it in his hand, absorbing its will. Before, Liam would feel a pang of pain shooting through his mind whenever he did that. Now, there was nothing. Liam quickly tamed the beast will in half an hour, before pulling it out and imbuing it to the bloody shadow. The bloody shadow started to transform and take on a 3-dimensional shape. It wriggled and squirmed violently, as though it wanted to escape. It continued to morph, until vaguely resembling a miniature, disfigured, gnarly version of the Black Panther. Even a shrill but suppressed shrieking noise resounded from it. Then it started to melt and revert to its original state, its disturbing screams fading into silence. Liam's eyes widened. A massive, massive success. Practicing with the black hole wasn't the only thing Liam had done during the past months. On the side, he had also tinkered with the ravenous leash arts, but it wasn't going very well. A very important component was missing, which the whole art depended on. The material itself. Now, Liam's shadow and blood had merged together, turning into something capable of imitating live creatures. In truth, however, it wasn't alive. It was simply the properties of his blood and shadow combining, forming an imitation of the real thing. It was just a beast will that gained a semi-physical form. A shell formed by shadow and blood. Now, all that's left is figuring out how to work the ravenous leash arts. Liam had found the necessary material for his ridiculous plans. Both for the enhanced ravenous leash arts and the shifter body. All he needed to do now was find a way to make the procedures work. As if that was any easier. What should I call it though? The new material was something, well, new. It was a profound innovation. If Liam had to guess, no one else in the world had done what he did today. Probably. Liam shrugged. Names weren't really his strong suit. Blood shadow is good enough. Nevertheless, Liam put his head into his work once again. 3 more months passed. Liam had devoured more of Wildfang's corpse. 2 arms and a foot, to be precise. Eating the foot like some sort of vicious zombie didn't look pleasant at all. But Liam's blood had arrived at the upper tier of rank 2. There weren't any major changes, besides the incredible regeneration speed and purity, but Liam could tell his blood was taking its first few steps towards some sort of transformation. What kind of transformation that was, Liam had no clue. Liam's understanding of what vampires did when they advanced wasn't much, but even with that, he couldn't apply it to a human's physical deposition. In the first place, all Liam did was awaken blood manipulation abilities by purifying a vampire's blood and consuming more than a dozen nexus. All of Liam's centers of power were steadily growing as well. More importantly, Liam's body finally entered the middle tier of rank 4. It took more than a year and a half that he spent in that substage. But considering the fact that he didn't have a body tempering method, that was actually extraordinary. Most of it was due to eating Wildfang's corpse, but it was also due to his rapidly progressing blood. With the substage advancement, Liam's Ashura form had gotten stronger. Enough to make it slightly easier to dig into a rank 5's flesh. Liam's shadows were naturally being darkened and largened at the same time. In fact, his inner world was connected with the largening quality. So long as Liam enlarged his shadows, the space inside the inner world would expand as well, albeit at a snail's pace. At the same time, Liam continued to expand his blood shadows, repeating the black hole procedure over and over. Day by day, the prospect of having to venture into the mainlands was coming nearer. At the same time, bits and pieces of various news from around the world entered Liam's ears. A few familiar names were gaining traction within Ikoria. Mainly, Nord the Giant's Heir, Rin the Dragon's Flame, and Nessa the Death Flower. Chapter 270 Infamy. Liam almost laughed when hearing the familiar names through Jargon's daily updates, and the stories behind them. All things considered, his time at the academy was good. It was a necessity. It provided temporary shelter for Liam to get away from his pursuers. There, he managed to understand the world better, to get stronger, and to experience foreign lands. But he ended up becoming an enemy to the entire country right after. Nevertheless, Liam was intrigued to find out the meanings behind their names. Nord's moniker, the Giant's Heir, was the most interesting. During the trip to the inheritance grounds the academy hosted for all third years, Nord had somehow met the conditions of becoming an heir to the inheritance's bequeathment. And what he was an actual heir to was the most shocking of all. Giants. The so-called lost race. Liam was actually interested in those tidbits of history during classes. The giants were this mythical race that seemed to hold profound wisdom and could enlighten someone's cultivation with just words. Their physical strength was something ridiculous from what Liam heard. Something about picking up mountains with their bare hands and drinking up entire oceans. So, how the heck did someone like Nord become their heir? Liam didn't know how that moron had actually met the conditions, but he honestly couldn't care too much. And then there was Rin, the dragon's flame. She apparently had figured out a way to infuse parts of a magical beast with her own body and momentarily attain their power. In truth, that was an amazing ability. Even around the ballpark of making something like a black hole. Who was he kidding? Of course it wasn't. Though, Liam put his arrogance aside and admired that ability nonetheless. The fusion between two races was never easy. But Liam was attempting it with 3. Still, his attempt was much easier than normal due to the effects of his blood and the support from the king's eye. At the same time, Liam was attempting that with the shifter octopus, one of the most mendable and easy to mold creatures to date. Rin wasn't as restricted. Although the name Dragon's Flame indicated an actual dragon, Liam imagined something less powerful. Her ability to do that without any supporting abilities was truly commendable. And finally, there was Nessa, the Death Flower. She had gained that title due to her ability to mix and match alchemic ingredients to create devastating potions. Although it was some time since Liam had met the dainty noble, the moniker Death Flower was a little bit too much for someone like her. Unless, of course, she had finally learned a grim thing or two about the world. Liam scoffed. It seemed like the royals of Ikoria were trying to drown out Liam's infamy by propagating other, more exaggerated names. Liam's existence was a dirty stain on their entire country, after all. It made it look like anyone could waltz in their finest institutions, siphon them of priceless knowledge, and escape without any further notice. Nevertheless, Liam thanked them sincerely for their efforts to mask his name. He didn't care what people thought, preferring that they didn't think about him at all. Aside from that, there wasn't anything significant from the other major countries. Not even the Corsan lands. The world was at peace. But who knew how much of that was real? It wasn't like the powerhouses of the world were sipping tea and baking cakes. Throwing away any unnecessary thought, Liam focused back on the task at hand. Both the renewed ravenous leash arts and the triumvirate body were developing. For the former, Liam estimated that he was about 50% into remaking it to fit his needs. And for the latter, it was a fifth of that percentage. The level of complexity between the two techniques was unparalleled. It might take me years to make it at this point. Liam supposed that was fair. Honestly speaking, he was progressing a little bit too fast on all fronts. He somewhat expected there to be a surprise tribulation somewhere. Still, Liam made full use of the remaining period of peace. The Blooders arts were now perfectly suitable for him. In his inner world, Liam activated the blood arts. Ichor seeped through each of his orifices and enveloped him in a glorious set of sleek knightly armor. Plates of glamorous, crystallized blood connected in interlocking parts that provided a perfect balance of maneuverability and powerful defense. A sharp, angular, blood-made helmet covered Liam's head and hair. Partly due to his own tinkering, the front part of the helmet resembled the Oni mask from Liam's childhood. As a tribute to Revel, he'd shaped the front of the mask to resemble a blood demon. Best of all? There were two sharp blades, a wakizashi and a katana, in Liam's hands, which would regenerate as long as he supplied it with blood. At first, they were javelins, but Liam had just swapped those out in favor of his usual swords. Using the blood demon arts, which was what Liam named it, made him pale a little due to the amount of blood used, but it was totally worth it. This was why Liam enjoyed periods of peace. What was better than raising all qualities of one's strength without the hassles of conflicts and fights? But life was not that simple. Soon, the temple would venture into the mainlands. Unforgiven Shadow was patient. A few years of waiting was nothing to him. But that didn't mean that he would simply remain idle. As soon as the temple grew in force and strength, they would mobilize and make their presence known to the world. But there was something Liam didn't understand. The Imperial Legion had a rank 6 powerhouse. The general. One couldn't compare a hill to a mountain. Nor a mountain to a star. Obviously, in this analogy, the general was the star. So, why was the Unforgiven so sure he could enact his revenge? No less, on the Dual Empire as well? He had to have a plan. Liam shook his head. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. All he could do was experiment and train like he always did. 5 more months passed. Eventually, the period of peace and quiet had been extended for a total of 1.5 years. Liam was roughly 18.5 years old now. Finally, he had devoured enough of Wild Fang's body to experience a change in his blood. And the result was nothing short of shocking. Chapter 271 Transfiguration. Devouring Wild Fang's body had gotten a lot easier once Liam advanced to the middle tier of rank 4. Wild Fang's rank 5 body was densely packed with pure flesh. Each bite provided Liam with heaps of energy and nourishment. Liam couldn't do much with the man's core. It was extremely valuable, but Liam couldn't eat it. Who knew how much energy that thing had? Explosive amounts, Liam imagined. He decided to save it for some time in the future. Maybe by then, he could find a use for it. There wasn't any fixed expiry date for it, but it would lose a bit of its potency as time passed. Currently, Liam was in the basement of his quarters. His eyes were closed in thought as he digested Wild Fang's flesh subconsciously. Then, Liam felt a change, his eyes opening with a slight alarm. It felt like his blood started to circulate, faster? In different ways, too. It seemed to go front and back, expanding and contracting erratically at the same time. Liam couldn't do anything except let the process run its course. There wasn't anything alarming about the transformations taking place. In fact, most of it was nourishing, besides the fact that Liam's insides were boiling. Liam's skin turned crimson red. Then back to pale. Then red again. Like a chameleon, his complexion switched between bright red to bone white. Liam could feel his blood seep into his bones, muscles and skin. What is happening? Liam furrowed his brows. Obviously, he knew his blood was advancing to rank 3. But the process was still strange and foreign. Over time, an invigorating feeling washed over Liam. It felt like every single wound he'd accumulated in his dangerously lived life was literally melting away. Then, the process stabilized, and Liam's blood was calm again. Liam heaved a sigh. He was so calm, and extremely powerful. It felt like his entire body was riddled with knots, which were now untied. I shouldn't get used to this feeling. It deludes me into a sense of serenity. Too much peace was also a bad thing, Liam realized. After all, the noble Icorians were failures for this exact reason. Peace had cost them their strength. Victory had defeated them. If they were forced to survive under grueling circumstances, then Icoria would absolutely triumph over all the other countries due to the numerical advantages. Nevertheless, Liam inspected the changes in his blood. First, he willed it out. However, something strange happened. Instead of Liam's blood pouring out from his hand like normal, a precise vertical slit opened up on his palm. Liam's eyes widened. He could see all his hand veins, bones, and muscles in full view. But there was no pain, and no blood leaked from the self-made wound. A moment later, the slit closed. Right after, the slit opened again. Liam took a deep breath. In that instant, the layers of skin and muscle covering Liam's palm slowly peeled away naturally, like a flesh banana. Eventually, only his bare bones were visible. Liam closed and opened his fist, which only consisted of black bones with a slight tinge of red. His skin and muscle had been retracted to his wrist, making it look like a gross, ingrown tumor. A second later, everything had slowly reversed back to normal. Liam's palm was coated with layers of flesh and muscle like they weren't stripped off a second ago. Of course, the one opening and closing these gruesome wounds was Liam himself. If I'm understanding this right, I can now control my skin, muscles, and even my bones at a lesser capacity. Liam's blood manipulation had extended towards his entire body. Liam gulped. I have to check the limitations of it, Liam thought with a focused face, taking off his wrappings. It could just amount to a simple parlor trick if all I could do is show my skeletal system. Could I change the structure of my face or body? Somewhat excited, Liam tested the limitations of his rank 3 blood. The results made Liam simultaneously happy and just a tiny bit disappointed. For one, he couldn't change the anatomy of his body. What did this mean? For example, he couldn't sprout more than 2 hands at a time. Nor could he grow eyes on the back of his head. Basically, there was a limit to his organs, and he couldn't decrease or increase their number. If he had that ability, the triumvirate body would have been so much easier to make. However, Liam could transform his hand into a gnarly claw designed just to rip through flesh and cause grievous wounds. At the same time, he could make instantaneous, but somewhat slight, changes to his bodily structures. For example, if he were to run away from someone, he could turn the inside of his leg bones hollow to lighten himself, and pad his calves with muscle to increase his speed. All things considered, this really was an amazing ability. Also, Liam could change his facial features and even his stature without relying on the king eye's illusions. This wouldn't really deter those in the upper ranks, but those below could no longer probe Liam's identity. That was good on its own. Test. Oh, wow, Liam raised his brows in surprise as he spoke to himself. Liam could even change his voice. Right now, he sounded like an old man who smoked 14 cigarettes every single day. The opposite was also true. Liam could make himself sound soothing and serene, like an a cappella singer. With all of this, the triumvirate body did get easier to make. It was basically a very advanced, glorified form of plastic surgery. Liam named this ability transfiguration. Smiling, Liam suddenly realized that he didn't even test out his blood strength and his regeneration abilities. Coagulations of blood formed around his arm to form a beautiful, sleek, lethal katana that crystallized in an instant. It didn't have the same complexity and usage as a rank 3 item, but its sharpness, durability, and other qualities were roughly on the same level. Using its pure edge, Liam swiped as hard and long as he could at his shoulder. Shing! It sliced through 4 inches of Liam's hardened skin, and the wound was roughly 13 inches in length. Blood poured down his body, but it wasn't an unreal amount. 4 seconds passed. And the wound healed. Chapter 272 Beginning. Liam was taken aback by just how fast his wounds healed. Calling it incredible was a disgusting understatement. Perhaps not even upper-tier rank 4 bodies healed that fast. It was understandable, though. Both the rank 3 throes of anguish and the rank 4 dark wraith had regenerative abilities. And Liam's blood had grown to something monstrous on top of that. Paired with his middle-tier Ashura body, it wasn't too surprising. I'm pretty unkillable now, Liam realized with a chuckle. Unless they have some sort of bomb to throw at me. Who was he kidding? Even bombs weren't enough to stop him. Not with transfiguration, his rank 3 blood, and his shadow working together to keep him breathing. Though, even after a year and a half had passed, Liam still hadn't achieved a rank 3 core. Even after consuming 2/3 of Wildfang's corpse. Sometimes, advancements required dedicated periods of seclusion. Liam had basically balanced more than a dozen different responsibilities throughout the past 1.5 years. Each one took a specific part of his day. The rank 4 psionic rune itself was a massive headache on its own, both literally and figuratively. But Liam was slowly getting used to the rune. If Liam had put all his efforts into advancing to the 3rd rank, it definitely would have been possible to finally become a rank 3 cultivator. At least, by human rankings. With 4 centers of power, Liam was already much stronger than the average rank 3. Nevertheless, Liam was happy with his current progress. Before Liam could perform more tests, the sounds of acolytes gathering outside entered his ears. Is it time already? Liam thought with a slight scowl, putting on his wrappings and leaving his quarters. Liam had shortened his hair during the past year. Quite frankly, it had gotten way too long for comfort, and was difficult to cover using any sort of clothing. Thus, he simply kept it short. His height was a few inches taller. Liam was now 1.79 meters tall. His shoulders were broad and squared. His frame was a bit more pronounced now that he was a bit older. Nevertheless, Liam's features were still youthful. Cultivators aged differently compared to regular people. Their cores nourished them considerably, prolonging their longevity and lives. So it's begun, Liam thought with a sigh, following the herds of people rushing forward. Outside, under the darkness of the night, more than 6,700 temple acolytes had gathered outside Yusin's temple. With 6 new zeniths added to the mix. Obviously, the Temple of Shadow wasn't idle during the period of peace. They had recruited more and more people from around Alali. They could afford to delve deeper into the lands now that their gains had stabilized and their resources were at its peak. Rogue martial artists that had nothing to lose joined them as well. Of course, their goal wasn't just finding scum of the earth and turning them into acolytes. Those kinds of people would just betray them as soon as things get difficult. Liam had ousted jargon for the recruitment task since he had a keen eye for loyalty. And like that, the temple's numbers had risen to powerful heights. Not all of them were that strong, but that didn't really matter. What they needed were numbers to their name. They needed to show Alali that they had a proper backing. That they couldn't be dismissed as a small threat. There were countless other large-size, mid-size, and small-size sects living within the main lands. Why would the 7 clans care about any of them? Everyone was obedient to them. Nobody was challenging their authority. Even those that didn't like them couldn't show their hostility in the open. Not even rank 5 cultivators. Unforgiven Shadow wanted to shatter that view. Once he brings so many people out in the open, it could inspire others to do the same. Then, their forces would combine. At least, that's what Liam had deduced. What he imagined could very well be different than what Unforgiven Shadow planned. The man was crazy, after all. As everyone waited, Unforgiven Shadow finally left the temple and flew above the massive crowd. To his left and right were the 18 zeniths, which a few new faces were among. The original 6 looked much stronger than before, thanks to enjoying the benefits that came with raiding the countless sectors. The Golden Cranes eventually agreed to join the temple as well. All they really cared about was making new inventions, and the added force convinced them to merge. Enough hiding, Ucladd said with a cold voice, but it wasn't directed towards the acolytes. We will enter the mainlands. The acolytes cheered from the top of their lungs. But Liam was silent and pensive. Honestly speaking, this plan was reckless. Unless the Unforgiven had some sort of ace up his sleeve, he seriously needed to reconsider entering the mainlands willy-nilly. There were dozens of different rank 5 existences there. Not to mention, a damn rank 6 powerhouse. However, Liam knew Ucladd was not dumb. Far from it. By now, there was a set of rules that the higher-ranked cultivators of the world abided by. What would happen if Queen Darius suddenly decided to stop Liam's escape? It definitely wasn't as though she was unaware of it. Was she perfectly capable of stopping him? Yes. But did she? No. This meant that higher-ranked cultivators seriously couldn't care less about those ranked below them, even if they could erase the most extreme issues with a wave of their hand. Granted, they definitely manipulated things on a grander scale. Just not enough to bother the livelihood of those below. And Ucladd perfectly knew that his revenge was not possible unless he gained powerful allies. I'm more worried about what to do if that rank 6 decides to single me out because of my Ashura genes. To everyone else, the Ashura was literally an enemy of the world. If Liam was caught by any other sector or organization, he'd be butchered or experimented on. As if hearing his thoughts, Ucladd threw something towards Liam. It was somewhat reminiscent of the rank 5 corpse he threw at him. Liam caught it and inspected it. Instead of a body, it was a shadow-made pin, barely the length of a pinky, and narrower than a strand of hair. It will hide your aura and chaos, Ucladd transmitted. Those within the mainlands will not take kindly to an Ashura. You are cursed to them. Great. Thanks. Chapter 273 7 Clans. Liam stuck himself with the shadowy pin, which shot into his body. There was no pain, but a tight constricting feeling securely wrapped around his chaos pearl. Liam tried taking out a strand of chaos, but nothing happened. Hopefully this is enough. How does he plan to arrive at the mainlands, though? Liam thought as the acolytes cheered and the elders remained silent. It will probably take months and less. Rumble. Behind the temple, the silhouette of something rising through the ground caused the island to shake. Everyone felt a tinge of alarm when they saw what came out, but calmed down when the elders hadn't moved from their place. It was the monolith lion. Only, there were no traces of Wild Fong's influence on it. It was just a little bit smaller, but all of its brown and yellow fur had been transformed into pure black. With wide steps, it stopped right in front of the temple's army, and Unforgiven's shadow perched on top of its furry head. Liam's eyes widened with shock. Everyone was pretty much in the same boat. How is that possible? The Unforgiven was breaking every cultivation law before everyone's eyes, and quite frankly, it was getting ridiculous. Formations, inscriptions, and even forging. The guy had it all. Ucladd didn't deign anyone an explanation. In large groups, herds of people started to climb up the beast with excited expressions. Liam was no exception, but he waited until the front parts were taken. He wanted to limit his exposure to people, especially since riding through on a freaking lion would no doubt gain a few nasty looks. Eventually, Liam made his way up. He was somewhere around the back of the lion, his view similar to what someone would see off a 7-story building. I need to get my ravenous leash arts fixed soon. Maybe I can do something similar at one point. Once everyone had settled down, the monolith lion began to move. No. It began to run. Slowly at first. Very fast right after. It leaped over the island cliff in a wide arc, then began to plunge into the ocean below. Hush! Splshhhh. Waves flew everywhere from the wide point of impact, sending violent ripples throughout the ocean. If there weren't inertial repelling formations covering the monolith lion's back, everyone would have already flown off. That said, people started to laugh very loudly and cheered. Most of the new acolytes had never experienced something this mighty. They were dregs of society, forced to resort to crime for a few scraps. The older acolytes and elders just loved the thrill that came with an edge of danger. Liam was just quiet. But he couldn't help but chuckle lightly under his breath. It did feel exhilarating, he wouldn't lie. The island slowly grew distant. The monolith lion took wide strides to swim through the ocean separating the island from Alali's main soil. As the cheers continued, Liam checked one of his space rings. There were roughly 27 parasite worms there, wriggling as though they were alive, along with another 14 abyssal needles. The former was much easier to make, hence why there were so many. Liam hadn't actually tested them. There was no one to attack, after all. Pretty soon, the monolith lion emerged from the water and ran straight towards the center of Alali. The speed that it was going at was alarming, bulldozing through the forests, leaping over hills and clawing up massive mountains. Yusin didn't bother being discreet, either, choosing to traverse through a main. It would take just a few hours to reach the mainlands. The surrounding sects were obviously alarmed by the sudden rumbling noises that spread across their lands. Their first thought was, "We're being attacked." Dozens of rank 4 patriarchs of small-sized and mid-sized sects shot out of their homes to see the source of the invasion. Just to see a massive lion, atop of which were loudly cheering humans, was past them and head towards the mainlands. Before long, that giant lion faded into the distance, the ground slowly stabilizing as it disappeared. "What did I just witness?" one sector patriarch uttered under his breath. The rank 5 aura resonating from that lion was alarming. All those who saw the event instantly consulted their neighboring sectors. News travels faster than light. Since whoever commanded that beast didn't attack them, it meant that something was occurring within the mainlands. Something important. Thus, they made preparations to venture into the mainlands themselves. Like this, important figures and high-ranking martial artists gathered from all over Alali to understand the volatile situation. Even rank 5 cultivators were no exception. Them and their thousands of disciples prepared for migration. The winds of change were blowing over the region. Meanwhile, Liam began to change his features and stature to something less, well, like him. Using a special dye, he changed the color of his hair to a lustrous black. His cheekbones sank a bit, and his lips grew thinner. Thicker muscle padded his arms and body, making his form sturdier than usual. Slightly increasing the density of his muscles was also possible. Liam's transfiguration could swap out certain qualities to different areas. Liam basically converted his blood into muscle. And that actually gave him a significant boost in strength. Liam had tested these abilities with the Ashura form, and similar to his shadow, it was much more difficult to control. "Is it just me, or do you look bigger than usual?" Krell came up behind Liam, along with Jargon and a few other shadows. Appearance changing wasn't exactly the newest thing for the sect, but a significant change in stature wasn't really possible. "I've been lifting." Liam's terse response made the others laugh. After 1.5 hours, a civilization grew visible across the horizon. Structures and towering shapes of different design and length formed a grand circular formation, built around 7 different domains. This was the 7 clans. And this was the mainlands. Chapter 274 Domains. Liam paid close attention to the different domains surrounding the mainlands as the lion grew closer. They covered massive plots of land and each had their own theme. Each domain was like an individual city. Every corner bustled with thousands of martial artists. The only reason Liam even caught a glimpse of each one was due to the high vantage point the lion provided. "I can explain them one by one if you'd like, my liege," Jargon offered. Liam instantly nodded. He barely knew their names, but Jargon had a knack for studying the surrounding landscapes. His time as a growing disciple of a popular sect had allowed him to do that, after all. One had serpentine-shaped towers and swervy buildings, like venomous snakes wildly lurching at the sky. In the very center of that vast domain was an arched cobra statue, the crimson, vertical eye slits of which subtly moved left and right. That's the Deathlung clan. They're specialized in alchemy. Lethal poison, specifically. Another sect had massive, blocky structures that had beautiful, profound-looking calligraphy draped over on every corner. Everything was inscribed with layers of complexity, and it looked like an impregnable fortress, with a grand castle in the center. The myriad brushes. They're not battle-oriented, but their inscriptions are known to be profound. They are rumored to even lay their comprehension down on ink. Another looked incredibly beautiful, like a natural archipelago with towering, lush, pink and white trees sprouting from every corner. They resembled the sakura tree from Earth, except the leaves pulsed with a violet, living glow, fluttering lightly under an invisible wind. That one there is the unending wind. They study the way of the sword, and believe that wind is the sword's element. The subsequent few jargon pointed out were similarly amazing. There was the unmoving mountain sect, which featured a pearly white mountain that the disciples lived inside and out of. They resembled little ants from just how colossal the landscape was. Beside them were the solar spears, whose spear arts were apparently so deadly, they didn't stab through their enemies. They incinerated them to ashes. As such, they were the least challenged from the 7 clans. Up next was the cerulean dragons, specific to the water element. Other than the obvious draconic designs, there was no need for jargon to explain. Sapphire-scaled dragons, along with smaller winged creatures, flew this way and that over that domain, centered around an obvious rank 5 dragon in the center. They were actually alive. It seemed like the cerulean dragons were the type to tame beasts instead of forcing them against their will, like the ravenous leashes. But out of all of these, there was one that stood out like a star. And it was just as bright as one. It was hard to miss, and its design was just magnificent. A palace made from pure light. It was the largest domain out of the 7, as well, despite being the one with the lowest number of disciples in their clan. But that didn't really matter when you had a rank 6 on your team. And that is the Luminous Light sect, the Moyong family, unofficial rulers of Alali. The conversation ended there. The monolith lion was soon noticed by the sects that lived around the 7 clans. These lower sects weren't anything to scoff at either. Their forces could very well match the temple's strength. Combined as one entity, they could obviously defeat them. But they weren't one entity. Most of them hated each other with relentless scorn. The very reason they abided was because of the 7 clans and their combined strength. They were just too stupid to realize that they could do the same. Yusin was here to change that. A massive shadow suddenly enveloped the monolith lion and hid all the acolytes from view. Liam's instinct screamed as a rank 5 cultivator with long red hair and a crimson robe flew in front of the monolith lion. "State your business," he shouted with a frown. Yusin had his mask on. But he slowly took it off. The rank 5 cultivator's face fell. "Silver? You're still alive? How?" There was a tone of solemnity in the man's voice. Yusin said nothing for a while. Most rank 5 cultivators knew who the Unforgiven was. And not all of them were enemies to him. Some were friends. Some were natural allies. Some were lifelong brothers. "I'm not here for you, Zen," Yusin said, his face emotionless and distant. "I'm here for a talk with them." Zen blinked. He hadn't expected that reaction. Zen and Yusin were practically brothers before the exile. But that was the issue. The exile. All Zen could do was watch it happen, afraid to protest against the rulers. Now, nothing of warmth was left to Yusin. More rank 5 cultivators approached the area, but only watched from afar. This particular region was under Zen's control, which is why Yusin had gone through here first, avoiding a needless fight. Just past Zen was the 7 clans. The mainlands were slowly getting rowdier. Everyone felt something dangerous stirring under the eerie silence. Something bad was going to happen. Zen's shoulders sagged in defeat. He had no intentions of fighting the Unforgiven. "Forgive me, brother. I could not be there for you." Zen descended, and an open path opened up for the monolith lion to go through. "Get out," Yusin said as he passed through the outer ring of the 7 clans. I've come to talk. Unforgiven's influence spread. The world around him grew darker, except the area around the light-made palace. Yusin's shadows couldn't reach there. Yusin's words spread to each individual city. Everyone heard him crystal clear. They had seen him already, too, but they had to wait until his intention was identified. 7 figures left each of the 7 domains. Of course, the rank 6 was not among them. The Moyong family had a rank 5 cultivator themselves. Displeasure, shock, surprise, disgust, anger, scorn, disdain. These were each of the emotions the 7 had given the unforgiven. Chapter 275 Truth. Within the main lands, the air was so tense, one could cut it with a knife. Everyone looked at Yusin. Then they looked towards the other 7 gazing at him from a distance. Like this, they simply exchanged between the 2 different sides until one of them broke the suffocating silence. Their hostile auras filled up the horizon. Each one of them had a contrasting, unique appearance. One of them had flaming red hair and tight crimson clothing. A vicious, crude-looking spear was in his hand, rippling with waves of heat. The tip of the weapon roared with bright red flames. An excited smirk was on his youthful face. Silver. Have you come to settle your accounts? I'll be more than glad to take you on first. Surprisingly, the man didn't have any hate or anger in his tone. It was like he was enjoying the situation at hand. If it wasn't obvious, this was the sun's spear. Why have you come back? One of them said in a disdainful tone. We were kind enough to rule for exile. This is how you repay generosity? The one who spoke was a middle-aged woman with long poison-green hair, tied together with a Zanzi hairpin, and blood-red eyes. Noxious fumes of dark green and purple oozed from her figure. Even the other 6 didn't get too close to her. Naturally, this was the Miasma Queen, patriarch of the Deathlung sect. Everyone waited for Yusin's response. But the man didn't answer instantly. The audience seats weren't packed yet. There was still time for the entirety of Alali to come and view the debacle. Answer, brat, a bald, black-eyed, severe-looking man shouted, causing thousands of lower-ranking cultivators to faint instantly. His bodily structure wasn't the bulkiest, but his unshakable aura was unmistakable. This was the unmoving mountain. Despite their attempts to make him speak, Yusin was unflinchingly quiet. Eventually, though, Unforgiven Shadow's first words were spoken. I haven't come for war or revenge. Huh. The brat speaks of war. Do you have any idea how small you are? You're a pebble among mountains, a white-bearded, blue-eyed, black-haired man mocked derisively. On his back was an oversized brush pen used for calligraphy, the bristles of which had a golden sheen, taller than a person. Myriad brush. Imagine coming all this way and so dramatically, just to get exiled again, another added. That'd be funny, he laughed. The man in question had loose gray hair that fell to shin length. He wore layered platinum robes, and to his side was a lavish scabbard holding what looked like an odachi. Felling wind. That beast, I know it. Wild Fawn told me about the monolith lion years ago. You killed him, didn't you? Sapphire eyes, azure robe, tan skin, and short blue hair. Cerulean Dragon had a mixture of disbelief and wrath in his eyes. To his sides, draconic rank 4 spirit beasts flew around him. Silence. Instantly, the demeanors of everyone changed towards the Unforgiven. Now, they readied their weapons, but didn't attack. There were too many people around. Yusin did not respond to their comments, his gaze fixed to one particular person. The luminous light rank 5 cultivator. North Star. Everything about the man radiated royalty. Silver hair, pulsing with light, golden eyes, alabaster skin, and a luminous robe that glowed with ornate patterns. As of now, a look of absolute disgust was on the man's face. A few minutes passed as the 8 of them were simply hovering over the air. Yusin looked to the side. By now, 2/3 of Alali had gathered to watch the event. Hundreds of thousands of people stretched across the landscapes, and the numbers were steadily rising. The horizon had been filled with faces. Young, old, male, female, strong, weak. The only reason everything hadn't spiraled into chaos was because of the rank fives keeping the situation calm. But an altercation looked painfully imminent. The rank fives put different sound negating formations around the region, but Unforgiven's voice pierced through those. He wanted people to hear. Silently, Liam was watching from below the canopy of shadows Yusin had deployed on the lion. He would be lying if he said he wasn't nervous about the current ordeal. So many people. So many rank fives. Liam had to use his mental defense spells just to stay conscious. Several acolytes had already fallen asleep. Liam was sure that if Yusin stayed silent for a moment longer, the 7 rank 5 cultivators would start attacking him. Speak. You've prolonged your stay unnecessarily, Miasma Queen hissed, her crimson eyes suddenly constricted like a reptilian's. Eulalie deserves the truth, Yusin said suddenly. Everyone below looked at him with a mix of confusion, fear, and caution. Those above looked at him with just anger. What truth? Felling wind furrowed his saber-like brows. The 7 were losing their patience. Yusin paused. Then, he turned around to address the entirety of Eulalie. Have these lands not suffered enough? Yusin said with a bit of emotion in his voice. It may seem like it's flourishing. But the deaths caused by both the Imperial Legion and the Dual Empire have marred this country's history. How many islands were sunk to the depths of the ocean? How many children died in those wars? How many wives, fathers, brothers? Generations were erased. Yusin's tone got angrier the more he spoke. Those gathered listened intently, feeling anger rise up as they remembered the wars. The younger ones didn't share the same sentiment, but they were raised in Eulalie. Remnants of the war still remained, areas that no one could grow anything on, nor live upon for long periods of time. Even after centuries had passed. And pursuing war would only make things worse. Your demeanor is that of a pouty child not getting what they want, Myriad Brush insulted. Yusin exploded into sonorous laughter. Am I, now? Then I'll assume you don't know about the sacrosanct tree? Sancra what? Simultaneously, everyone watching raised their brows in confusion. Except Yusin, and North Star. The latter had a venomous look on his face. Yusin looked towards North Star with a broad grin. Isn't that right, brother? Did Father promise you the next miracle fruit? Or do our sisters take precedence? Chapter 276 Pi. Liam's eyes widened in absolute shock. Did this Yusin just say brother? No, before that, did he say father? Father as in, the rank 6 powerhouse of the Moyang family? From the looks of it, not even the 7 clan patriarchs knew that. Their wide eyes and furrowed brows were an indication. This instantly complicated things. And why was Yusin attempting to anger a damn rank 6 cultivator? Not to mention, his own dad? Well, Liam had a habit of pissing off Malcolm just for the heck of it now and again. Though, he'd get a nasty bruise or a broken bone or two, but it was worth it. This was different. Way different. But Liam was out of his depth. This was between the zeniths. All he could do was watch. As Yusin let his words linger in the air, there was grim silence. The 7 looked conflicted. On one hand, they wanted to kill the Unforgiven for his rude and untimely arrival. If they didn't nip this problem in the bud, then a revolution of sorts was starting. They weren't dumb. The 7 knew what Yusin was trying to do. But they had to listen. This miracle fruit, the fact that Yusin is actually from the Moyang family. They had to see where this led. North Star must have realized how venomous his face currently looked, since he lowered his head and raised it with a slightly calmer expression. But scorn couldn't really be hidden like that. It looked like the man was itching to unleash his spells and get rid of Yusin. But he couldn't. If he did, it'd make him and the Moyang family seem guilty of something. And now that his fellow 7 intended to hear the full story, he was forced to let it go on. Yusin creaked his neck to the side. So many people. There were more than 24 rank 5s watching the current event unfold. And more were coming. In truth, the Unforgiven really didn't want to make his burdens known to so many faces. But if he wanted to make his case as convincing as possible, he had to. Haven't you all wondered how the Hand of Light became a rank 6 so fast? Hand of Light. This was the powerhouse whose sole presence stopped the incoming wars against Ucladd. He was the strongest of us all, felling wind cut in, eyes narrowed. It was obvious he was going to break through the fastest. Ucladd nodded his head. Indeed. But then, how did he advance to the 5th rank not too fast after? Ucladd lightly pointed to the North Star, who grimaced in response. Silence. Indeed, it was strange. Roughly 500 years had passed since Hand of Light had become a rank 6 powerhouse. However, his son, who was a rank 4 zenith at the time, abruptly became a rank 5. And he was just under 350 years old. For rank 5 standards, that was too little. Unnaturally little. Sure, talent played an important part in these ranks. But how much talent could a person really have? All the rank 5s watching required almost twice the age to advance to a higher rank. However, when a rank 6 was involved, they couldn't apply the same rule set or thinking. The Moyong family was the strongest family in Ucladd to date. And they were all talented warriors that didn't even show themselves to the public. It wouldn't be surprising if they had amazing cultivation techniques and methods to increase their progress. Plus, since they were so few, they could spread more resources amongst one another. But now, everyone saw that progress in a different light. If they didn't have amazing generation-to-generation techniques, how did they progress so fast? What are you getting at? Miasma Queen hissed. What's this about a tree? Sun's Spear added with a slight frown. Ucladd was now addressing only the rank 5s and 4s. His words didn't reach anyone below those ranks, except his own acolytes, of course. There is a rank 6 tree beneath that massive light palace. Every half millennia, it gives birth to a special fruit. Whoever eats it naturally jumps a few ranks ahead, depending on how much they could naturally digest. Shocked silence. Everyone's jaws fell. There was such a thing? Certainly, that explained the unadulteratedly pure aura density around the mainlands. Staying here for just a few days even as a rank 3 cultivator could give months of progress. Of course, there were other sources of that density. Aura pockets, aura wells, and for some, aura caves. Because of this, they didn't really suspect such an incredible thing living under them. To keep its existence a secret, the Moyong family must have coated the thing with countless formations and inscriptions, just to reduce its influence. When hearing Ucladd say those words, Liam felt incredibly amazed. It was basically a way to fast-forward one's progress, without the dull time-wasting efforts that goes into it. There was nothing worth more to a cultivator than such a thing. And Liam could only imagine the rarity of such an item. Actually, he couldn't imagine it. In the first place, he couldn't even imagine the processes of the low zenith ranks. Suddenly, all those watching the debacle felt a sting of greed. They all wanted a piece of that pie. Wouldn't they have a chance to become a rank 6 powerhouse then? But why did Ucladd reveal that information to everyone involved? Couldn't he just keep it between him, the acolytes and the 7 clans? Ucladd scoffed. Why do you think the wars happened? Another round of shock arose in everyone's chests. Of course. Other than having natural aura reserves and valuable materials, that alone didn't warrant an invasion. But a rank 6 item definitely would. Still, if Hand of Light didn't want to give up his resource, he didn't have to. This was the thought that ran through everyone's mind. But Ucladd's next words reassured everyone. Consuming the fruit as a rank 6 won't work. Hand of Light cannot use the resource anymore. Ucladd paused dramatically, then grinned at everyone's shock. And in exactly 1 year, the tree will bear its miracle fruit. Chapter 277 Hold Back. Hearing Ucladd's words, everybody paused for a moment. Not a whisper was heard. The lower-ranked acolytes were out of the loop, but they couldn't really ask for context. The 7 rulers were quiet, and so were the rank 5s and 4s. Right now, they were pensive. If Hand of Light couldn't use it, then why was he keeping it for himself? That sort of thing didn't belong to one type of family. This wasn't royalty. And Ucladd didn't function like that. Whoever had the greatest martial artists deserved the highest resource. Everything was built around this type of system. Power was awarded. So the fact that the Luminous Light clan kept everything quiet was a very alarming fact. As such, they leaned towards the Unforgiven. Of course, not fully. They still didn't know how Hand of Light would react. If he chose to, he could wipe Ucladd off the map. It was not wise to be an enemy of such a person. Also, they had some qualms about the Unforgiven's personality. What, you think you're entitled to the fruit just because you were exiled? Myriad Brush said with narrowed eyes. Ucladd met his gaze with a chilling glare. No, you old coot. We're all entitled to it. Every single one of us has a right to the fruit. But we have to earn that right. North Star was quiet, but his eyes had turned into daggers piercing into Ucladd's flesh. However, he couldn't attack Ucladd. Why, though? Surely using everything to kill the Unforgiven would be far better than letting crucial secrets spill to everyone? North Star's face was as cold as ever. Ucladd laughed loudly. Everyone's attention fell on him. Even now, he hears us, but doesn't interfere, the Unforgiven said, his tone growing serious. It's just like him. The rank 5s watching felt an invisible droplet of sweat run down their brow. The air was getting a bit harder to breathe. They really were being watched. But other than that, there was no dominating aura anywhere. Nor did they feel any pressure. Father is merely watching. He doesn't disapprove, Ucladd said. We'd all be dead otherwise. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Disapprove of what? Sun Spear said with furrowed brows. Don't think you're entitled to our family's property, North Star said with a hostile tone. The sacrosanct tree is ours by right. Silence. No one could really deny that. Ucladd sighed, clearly annoyed. Isn't challenging someone for their properties normal in this country? You all made the laws, after all. Silence. No one could deny that either. North Star looked increasingly pissed off. It was as though he was looking for support, but everyone had turned into a potential enemy. Ucladd hid a laugh at his brother's sight. He's waiting for Father's support. Poor thing. All Father cares about is his glory. Everything else is beneath him. A moment later, the Unforgiven's expression steeled. Challenging you back to back for the fruit isn't effective, so here's what we'll do. Ucladd flew a little higher, his tone firm and eyes narrowed. A martial tournament between all the major clans and sectors. Whoever wins, will be rewarded with the miracle fruit, no matter the winner. If the Luminous Light clan has the supreme martial arts as they say, then prove it. If not, make way for the rest of us. Ucladd's words ended there. In Liam's opinion, he played it perfectly. He didn't threaten anyone, he made it clear that it wasn't just him who wanted the miracle fruit, and in the end, he provided a fair plan of action for all parties. Cerulean Dragon, Unmoving Mountain, Felling Wind, Miasma Queen, Sun Spear, and Myriad Brush were seriously considering the issue. Only North Star was discontent with the situation. He was meant to have the next miracle fruit in just a year. That would possibly make him a rank 6 powerhouse. And this exiled maniac took that opportunity from right under his nose. Worst of all, his father didn't voice his support. These pricks. They think they can sideline me? North Star inwardly snarled. He should have never shown his ugly face. All he could do now was pull through and honestly try to win the tournament. And execute Ucladd and his entire clan afterwards. A few minutes of silence passed. Slowly, the hostile air dwindled a bit. They were no longer intent on sending the Unforgiven back to exile. They couldn't do so in the first place. The 7 began to speak mentally among each other. In the meantime, the masses began to whisper among themselves. News started to spread in every corner of Ucladd. Liam grimaced. If they include me in this thing, there better not be any cameras. Eventually, the seven addressed the crowd. The seven clans will dictate th. Ucladd cut North Star off with a cold voice. No. I've set this into motion. I'm taking a seat at the table. Ucladd needs someone external. Someone who hasn't sat in their cushy palaces for so many decades. Although the seven looked extremely offended at those words, they couldn't disregard Ucladd's plight. All the other rank 5s were sort of on his side. They grumbled a bit, exchanging mental transmissions among themselves, but eventually relented. Of course, they didn't want to make enemies of the Moyang family. They asked North Star for permission to begin such an event. He gave them the okay. But his demeanor was much colder towards them compared to before. It was obvious that the relations between them were going to take a massive hit after this. Fine, the seven said in synchrony. A moment later, Ucladd flew towards the seven. Myriad Brush took his giant brush pen and stroked the air with it, somehow painting the air itself. Massive letters of blackish ink spread to form a powerful isolation barrier, encasing the 8 figures inside. Liam heaved a tense sigh. A tournament, eh? It's been a while. Liam scoffed as he remembered the regional power tournament. I don't have to hold back anymore. Chapter 278 Piece of the Pie. As the 8 of them spoke of terms, Liam wondered if he could have a small piece of that miracle fruit. Something of that level was extremely valuable, no doubt. But just a tiny bit? Was it too much to ask? Granted, Liam didn't even know if eating a rank 6 item was possible for a low-ranking cultivator like him. It probably wasn't. Or if Ucladd was even okay with giving him such an important resource. Considering everything Liam did for him and the temple as a whole, he was entitled to a small bit of the fruit. There are the elders to take care of before me. Or maybe he wants to consume the whole thing for himself and become a rank 6. Nevertheless, Liam was thinking too far into the future. The tournament hadn't even begun, and he was already contemplating victory. Those 7 clans weren't a joke, and neither were those below them. Their martial arts were among the most advanced and ridiculously powerful. Where Ikoria shined in their inscription, formation and other specialization capabilities, martial arts were a different game. And Ucladd was absolutely unmatched in this regard. The temple's specialization is just the shadow, I have to win with my own prowess. Then again, Liam's prowess was disgustingly advanced for someone his age. If Liam was forced to use his Ashura form, he could even fight a rank 4. That said, those 8 were taking their sweet time discussing their terms. By then, the atmosphere erupted into a loud cacophony of different cheers and noises. The part about the martial art tournament already spread to the farthest edges of Ucladd. Every old man with a hunched back and a cane were making their way to the mainlands. This was a time of profit. Entertainment. Change. The borders of Ucladd were already being closed from all sides. Island-scale formations were being activated, negating any sort of jade connections or other forms of communication. Businesses were closing down and relocating towards the mainlands. The entire country was going to this world-class event. As Liam looked towards the hordes of faces, he grimaced. If the battles were indeed going to be for the public's eye, Liam would have to hold back. Everything about Liam was abnormal. His blood arts, his chaos, his blood manipulation and so much more, which he couldn't afford to let anyone know about. Liam prayed that Ucladd knew this fact. Nevertheless, a solid 2 hours passed. Finally, the isolation barrier whiffed out, and the 8 of them spread out. 8 months, North Star declared with a bit of annoyance in his tone. In 8 months, the tournament will begin. The terms will be decided by the 7 and him. Until that time, preparations are to be made. Boom. That was all North Star said before shooting away towards the light-made palace. Butthurt, everyone thought, but didn't say out loud. The discussions were fruitful, judging by Ucladd's satisfied expression. The Unforgiven flew back to the monolith lion's head. All sect leaders can participate, Miasma Queen said, obviously unhappy. The less people there were, the faster they could win the tournament and be done with it. But that Unforgiven wouldn't have it. Sun Spear had a broad smile on his face. Everything about the current situation was to his benefit. If you would like to opt out, that is also allowed, Unmoving Mountain added. The official rules will be revealed on the day of the tournament, Felling Wind said. Until then, we will all prepare, Myriad Brush said. Everyone else followed suit, each of the 7 flying towards their individual domains. The monolith lion swerved around and made its way towards the temple's home island again. A sea of people opened a path as Unforgiven's shadow took his time heading back. From the looks of it, he was no longer in exile. And he had no trouble flaunting his new status to the Alalians. I'm finally free. Yusin smiled lightly. But his expression turned stern a second later. Everything depends on this tournament. They'll be doing their best to push me out of this too. They'd lose the most if I win. Nobody wanted the Unforgiven to win. What kind of monster would he be once he became a rank 6 powerhouse? Yusin made it clear it was revenge he sought. Naturally, they had a hostile bias towards him. Yusin glanced towards Liam, who was currently cultivating as they made their way back. The way this tournament was made. Well, it was a bit different, that was for sure. Eventually, everyone made their way back to the temple. No longer did they need to be secretive of their quarters. In fact, some people were already contacting Yusin. They wanted to join the temple. They had seen the Unforgiven's stance on Alali. His grief over the dead and destroyed lands. In a flash, they realized Yusin's real personality. Alliances were already being put into plan. Once they had successfully arrived at the island, the Unforgiven dismounted and all the acolytes spread in different directions. Surprisingly, it was Yusin who approached Liam first, erecting a small-sized isolation barrier for them to talk privately. You plan on participating, right? He asked. Liam nodded. Good. Because you'll be a secondary fighter. Liam raised a brow. Meaning? Yusin looked to the side, where the main lands were. There will be different battles that the groups will participate in. But there's only one that really matters. The main battle and the secondary battle. The sect leaders. And their most promising mortal-ranked disciple. They both carry the same amount of weight. Since the tournament will be point-based, even if the sect leader is defeated, if their disciple wins all their bouts and attains the most points, they win the whole thing. Liam hummed in thought. You don't have to worry about holding back, Yusin reassured. I can probably add a rule that blocks outside viewing. You'll be able to fight with your chaos and demon form. Keyword, probably. Liam pursed his lips. Do I get a piece of the pie? Chapter 279 Blood Bond. Yusin heaved a long sigh, as though he had expected Liam's response. Has anyone told you you're a shameless prick? He insulted with a slight scowl. Many, Liam responded curtly, unfazed. In the first place, your body cannot handle something of that caliber. Most of your centers of power are too weak to even utilize the miracle fruit's nourishment. You'll simply explode. Liam imagined that much. But there has to be some sort of way to make it work. You can't say it's impossible for sure. A tiny bit wouldn't hurt too much, would it? Yusin remained silent for a few seconds. If we win. And if your contributions are good enough, then yes. I'll give you a very, very small portion of the fruit. Good enough, Liam thought, satisfied. Until then, get as strong as you can. The rules themselves aren't set in stone, so there's no telling what they might try to pull off. Liam nodded. The two parted ways afterward. Liam headed straight to his home. Now I definitely have to make the ravenous leash arts work. With the 8-month time period, he could do several projects, and Liam didn't waste a single second. Firstly, he began with the ravenous leash arts. Liam needed to find a way to make it work for his blood shadow. The heart of the technique was centered around the beast will. As long as the process stayed the same without changing its core functions, switching it to his needs was actually not that hard. Liam got to work and entered his inner world. For weeks on end, he stayed within the enclosed space and rigorously tinkered with the technique. He was already 70% through with it. On the side, Liam put more effort than usual on his cultivation. He was close to breaking through to the third rank of the core, after all. Despite how excited he was for that event, Liam first needed to get the ravenous leash arts in order. He even temporarily halted the triumvirate body's development and everything else to quicken the process. All the hard parts were cleared. Now, only the minor details remained. Inscribing with his new blood was a disgusting headache. Everything hurt. Even Liam's eagle-like vision started to swim and blur due to absorbing rank 3 blood. Nevertheless, as Liam continued the inscribing process, he quickly realized how powerful his blood had gotten. Now, he could fit a ridiculous amount of meanings into a compact droplet of ichor. Even though his comprehension wasn't anything little, his ink was his greatest aspect when it came to inscriptions. Like so, 2 months passed. / Liam crushed a rank 1 spirit beast's core in his hand and absorbed its will. 1 second passed. Liam had tamed the beast will. A moment later, he put a finger on his temple and pulled out the ethereal beast will from his mind, fixing it to his blood shadow. Liam's shadow squirmed and twisted. Slowly, it was starting to take a bestial form, letting out a shrill hiss and lengthening. Liam watched with constricted pupils as his 3-dimensional shadow grew serpentine scales and 2 little horns on its head. A minute passed. There it was. An actual rank 1 snake made from Liam's blood and shadow. Although it was just a rank 1, its strength was actually on par with a rank 2. This was due to Liam's rank 3 blood. It naturally boosted the strength of his shadow beasts. Liam commanded the horned snake to curl up his body with a single instinctual command. Then it bit him. The snake couldn't even nick his skin. But you're still too weak. Liam sighed, grabbing the snake in his hand. And crushing it. There wasn't any blood or viscera, but the snake broke apart ethereally and silently. Liam watched as his blood shadow simply reformed it again. This was the selling point of Liam's new and improved leash arts. He spent a good amount of time transforming his shadows into blood shadows. Then using his blood shadow as a material, he could simply reform his beasts. This reformation naturally consumed his blood, even without him using the black hole, since he'd designed it to do so. Without that aspect, everything fell apart. Liam could do the process with only lower-ranking beasts, but this was a temporary issue. I need to make them into something that actually increases my battle prowess. In a normal battle between people my rank, 1 rank 3 beast would just be a bother. More weeks passed as Liam hammered in the work, adding more than a few features to a process. By then, more and more people joined the Temple of Shadow. Now, they were a solid 10,000 in number, with a few zeniths in the mix. Another 2 months passed and Liam finally fixed the ravenous leash arts. Finally. He did the same process as before, except with a rank 3 spirit beast core. Except now. He added meanings to that beast will. Putting the beast will inside the blood shadow, Liam leaned back to watch intently as it transformed into a glorious rank 3 twilight wolf. Liam smiled. Now, if what I just did went correctly. Speaking verbally to the beast wasn't a requirement, but Liam did it anyway. Shoot a beam of darkness at me. The wolf growled, which grew louder. Hoof. A condensed beam of gaseous and liquid darkness shot straight at Liam, who tanked the attack with a smile on his face. As it cleared away, Liam's slightly corroded flesh instantly reformed. It worked. It actually worked. Liam could now tap into a spirit beast's innate abilities. Mainly due to adding meanings into a beast will, which didn't conflict with the ravenous leash arts. But Liam didn't call it the ravenous leash arts anymore. Liam had restructured, enhanced and rebuilt it. It was his blood bond. I have enough blood shadow for 1 more rank 3 beast. A long-ranged beast is preferable, but close range isn't bad either. Like so, another 2 months passed. And Liam's core rumbled with power. Chapter 280 Annoying. In the center of the temple's island, hordes of people surged and scattered in all directions. Throughout the past few months, teleportation matrices were built for easier transportation to the main lands, since the number of acolytes had gotten so massive. The entire island had slowly been cultivated and claimed for use. There used to be danger zones and different spirit beast threats, but all of those areas were cleared out and made into accommodations for the growing clan. The tournament was to begin today. Everyone had prepared immensely. Elder Jane cooked the strongest pills she knew. Elder Aki forged incredibly powerful weapons. Elder Jax inscribed those weapons. Elder Arisa and Virium helped the three in each individual regard. Elder Ryu, well, he couldn't really provide much. All he could do was shout motivational speeches for the entire island to hear. Funnily enough, it worked. His fierce voice and powerful words made the acolytes think they were stronger than they actually were. Liam had never wanted to kill a man more, though. The damn motivational shouts jolted him out of his rare resting days. Nevertheless, on the same day of the tournament, Liam's core started to rumble and shake. It was happening. The peak of the mortal ranks. By human standards, of course. Liam had to put his mind to the task. His core boiled and burned wildly. A tug-of-war began between Liam's mental energy and the advancing core. Slowly, though, Liam's mental energy was completing the advancement with ease. In reality, cultivators weren't expected to advance their minds first. It was always the body first, core second, mind third. Yet Liam denied all common sense and did it the other way around. Liam had already consumed a pill to help with the breakthrough process. It was a bit overkill, but he wanted it to be over with as fast as possible. And soon, it was. The solid contents of Liam's core began to reverse in stages. It instantly liquefied. Then turned into gas. All but a single strand of black gas remained in Liam's core. Liam closed his eyes and heaved a sigh. It felt amazing. The current rank 3 gaseous stage aura pulsing through his abdomen was invigorating his entire being. It felt like a powerful supercharger had made its way into his abdomen. It was ridiculous, quite frankly. It spoke of Liam's amazing battle prowess when he could regularly fight with cultivators at such a level. And now, Liam was one of these people. They didn't stand a chance. Whoosh! Liam's entire body burst with dark flames. Liam was sitting on a stone floor. Yet his darkness was rapidly eating away at it. Solid stone. Even with a single strand of aura in his body, Liam felt like the reserves were at least 4 times his regular amount. Running out of aura was never an issue for him. Maybe a difficult battle or two would force his hand, but it had been some time since Liam faced a worthy adversary. And now, Liam would probably never run out of aura. Stop the flames from enveloping him. This is it. I've surpassed everyone my age and beyond. Liam's eyes turned solemn. But it's still not enough. Liam was tired. Of hiding. Of conforming to man-made rules. Of running away. All of it. Every time Liam grew stronger, he was reminded that someone was stronger than him. And for some reason, that just pissed him off. It was like gaining $1 million. But knowing that someone else out there has $1 billion more. Liam clicked his tongue. He hated this feeling more than anything, but he knew it was just an ugly side of him that couldn't be suppressed. Nevertheless, spent a few minutes absorbing aura into his core. Currently, he didn't have a rank 4 cultivation technique, but perhaps the Unforgiven could give one to him. After nourishing himself to an acceptable amount, Liam exited his temple. Outside, the sky was filled with a soft hue of caramel. Dusk. Liam heaved a breath. The air was still and windless. There was a certain melancholy and solemnity about the atmosphere. Who knew? Maybe this tournament wasn't too bad. Liam could certainly bulldoze his opponents with ease. Hopefully I'll see some good martial arts, Liam smiled. Liam turned and shot towards the center of the island. Everyone was already leaving the island early in preparation. Liam was going to be the secondary fighter. This meant that he'd depart with Ucladd and stay to his side, playing the part of a talented disciple. A few more hours passed and night had fallen. Little stars twinkled within the firmament, allowing Liam to smile at their sight. Just wait. I'll get my hands on you soon enough. Heavy steps resounded behind him. The monolith lion, with Ucladd on top of it. Ready? The Unforgiven asked. Liam nodded, cocked his knees, enhanced by transfiguration, his shadow, and vanishing steps, then jumped a total of 45 meters in the air. And lithely jumped on top of the lion's body. Show off, Aki uttered under her breath. Although everyone used their teleportation matrices, Ucladd opted for a flashier way of entry. Him, Liam, and all the elders were on the lion. And maybe piss a few of them off in the process. Elder Jane approached Liam and gestured for him to take off his clothes. Liam raised a brow. Jane took out a pair of clothes from her shadow. They were coarse wrappings made from the hide of a rank 4 darkness beast. They had ornate drawings on its surface, insignia that marked the temple's shadowy powers. Liam took off his clothes and quickly wore the new attire. Only the skin past his elbow was visible, revealing his tattoos. That was probably on purpose. How does this tournament thing work exactly? Liam thought. Liam hadn't been briefed on the specifics. The rules still weren't set, after all. However, the general outline of the tournament was fixed. 50 points, Ucladd said, his gaze forward. Wind pulled back his short hair as the monolith ran with incredible speed. Each main battle victory gives 5 points to the victor, and each secondary battle gives 5 points to the victor. 5 battles for him. 5 for me. That sounded a bit difficult. However, their points would obviously combine. With that in mind, it didn't sound as hard.